Okay, so Sebastian, thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me virtually. As you know, I am somewhat of a social justice educator and an activist, and a lot of what I'm seeing right now on social media is very divisive. And I figured I would start a series of talking to people that I know, whether it's a really close personal relationship or a work relationship or people that I just know peripherally, about important issues in hopes that it starts a trend and that people actually start to try to bridge the gap or find common ground or understand each other better and understand how current events are affecting people that don't look like you. So I'm calling this Word with Friends, and I hope I don't get sued for that. I'm calling this Words with Friends, and I'll be speaking to a lot of different friends this week and hopefully into the future. And so for those that are watching this that don't know me, I'm Maria. I'm a Black woman living in America, but I'm also a higher education administrator and a social justice educator. And this is my form of activism. And Sebastian, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure. Thanks so much for chatting with me about this.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Hua-Yu Sebastian Cherng. I would say that my work with the capital W has always focused on issues of race, ethnicity, immigration, and particularly in the educational realm. But things have definitely kind of spread out beyond that. In a previous lifetime, I was a middle school teacher in San Francisco, where I kind of learned the Bay Area version of activism. Although I was born and raised in Maryland, and I feel like for better for worse, for better, I'm an East Coaster, which definitely it's relevant to all the protests that are going on today. And my work hat is I am an associate professor of international education at NYU, where my research focuses on pretty much everything I just said before.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now, what I'm going to ask everyone that I speak to is the same question. What are some issues that are really important to you that you wish people understood from your perspective? And we can go from there. So what's happening right now that you want to comment on or that you have an understanding of that you want to share with other people?
I think that because of my research, I think I'm often called to speak publicly on issues of immigration, of documentation, and education. But I've always said that my entree into justice has always been very centered on race. Not that immigration has immigration has everything to do with race, and particularly how the U.S. continues to try to exterminate Black people. Not only is it completely pressing right now in this very moment as there's police sirens in Soho, which is close to where I live, and not to say there's a hierarchy of need, right? I think that activism, I wish more people did more of it, right? Whatever your cause may be. But I've always been, and my research is now kind of bridging into that realm of what does solidarity look like for non-Black people of color. I think given NYU's student population, you and I, Maria, are both rather experts on talking to white people about this. And which is its own version, which, you mentioned Facebook and all this stuff. That's, I was saying to my partner yesterday, my Facebook fatigue is, sadly, very, very sadly, it's not about, more stories of Black death, because I just assume that for every recording that we have of murder, of police murder, that there's thousands of ones that go unrecorded, right? In prisons, in jails, on the streets. But what really kind of makes me tired is kind of a performance by white liberals of what to do, right?
Right.
And I know that most of the white people on my Facebook feel really bad. They feel very sad. You and I, we know their emotions, right? And as of this moment, I'm my work is always to center, particularly Black women, right, in my activism. And I'm just getting way too much shit from white people about how sad they feel, right? And that is the fatigue I feel.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate that. I've been trying to figure out a way to deliver that message to people that mean well, but are reaching out to me, to find answers, right? And on one hand, as an educator, I find it a responsibility to teach people about the proper ways, to talk to racist family members and things like that. But on the other hand, it's all like you said, I'm fatigued. Like the racial battle fatigue going into work and knowing that no one is going to talk about the elephant in the room and expect me to develop, the programming or the messaging around it because I am the Black woman in my office, right? But also seeing people that, what's traumatizing to me is like white people that I know and I love, that I've broken bread with, that I've invited into my home, that I've, celebrated, milestones with, are often the ones that are posting about, about the reaction, about the resistance, about, riots, as opposed to commenting on the 400 years of inhumane and brutalizing treatment that precipitated it. And so that is troublesome to me because in my perspective, that negates my existence in this country, my experience in this country. Yeah. And it's like those people are often more concerned with keeping order. Like and like Martin Luther King said, a negative peace, which is the presence of order, as opposed to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. And that's what's so important. What I want people to understand, it's going to be messy. It's going to be hard. Windows are going to get broken. People are going to get looted, but they're also recognize that there are people that are taking advantage that are not the protesters. There are anarchists and white supremacists that are kind of hijacking these protests because they see an opportunity to change the narrative. And they're succeeding at that because that's what everyone's talking about. They're talking about the looting that's happening as opposed to the issue at hand, which was a Black man that was only suspected of forgery that was killed in broad daylight on camera for the world to see. Yeah. And so that is a problem that I wish people would all be talking about, and not as a qualifying statement. Not, I know it was wrong that he was killed, but. Like, no, there's no but. It was wrong that he was killed. The officers that were involved and that were accomplices to this should be prosecuted, because that's what's troubling. When we have evidence, video evidence of people getting murdered for no reason, the officers are never held accountable for it. It's not enough to lose your job. You murdered someone. So you should be held to the same justice that anyone else would.
Yep. And I think even like second-degree murder and manslaughter is like, legally, it does. I'm not that I'm a legal scholar, but I mean, when you have video evidence of so many people telling you, stop it, stop it, stop it, when the EMT is like, stop it, and you don't, that's, I mean, at some point you're like, what is premeditation, when literally you have medical professionals telling you you're murdering this person and you just stoically kneel harder, right?
Right.
I mean, about the Facebooks, right? The social media, and kind of how my reaction to just, these very, nice white people who, they're not necessarily posting like the conservative things, right? These are most of our colleagues, I think. These are the ones that like, I think will very happily say that they are completely against racism and then do absolutely nothing about it. And some of it is like when white people are posting that, I don't know what to do. I'm like, you're kind of bearing your own ass a little bit, right? It's like, at this point, like, why does someone need to message you, Maria, to ask, to get your advice on what to do if they haven't read the 5 bazillion articles, books, whatever, right? Like, I mean, and that's my response and it's a little tricky because when people message me for advice, it's usually former students. So I feel a little bit worse being like, read, right? Although oftentimes I'm just like, you haven't come to the classroom doing your homework yet, right? So here's some homework, and come back later, right?
Yeah, first step, read the syllabus. There's a lot of resources.
yeah, you did not read it, right? But I think also people have written quite eloquently about this, it's like the exceptional Black, right? So you can be, you're white, your white friends who commit racism or our white friends who commit racism will see you as like, not like them, right? You're not a thug. right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, although obviously I do not know that specific dynamic, I mean, for Asian Americans that look like me, we are the model minority, right?
Mm-hmm.
And model minority really very much, especially in moments like this, means that we cannot perform, we can't actually be enraged, right? Part of it is like we're emasculated and we're supposed to be obedient, but also part of being the model minority means that we don't stand up for Black people, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't stand up for anyone. We don't stand up for ourselves. And this is like the predominant kind of stereotype, the way that America and whiteness reads us. And so in some ways, I'm very like familiar with people making the kind of like nice, docile one is not the exception for Asian Americans, it's the rule, right? And it's always, and I think like people are complicated, but they can say to you, they can like break bread with us, and they can, you know, even say things that are, you know, not horrible, and then do horrible things later. And not just because we all mess up, right? Because we all mess up. But I think you can actually, I mean, whiteness and white privileges, I mean, to me, it's like, people study it for a reason, because it's like, we don't know we don't know all about it, right? And it evolves, and it's like, I don't know, it goes back to the whole, like, the devil was quite brilliant, right?
Yeah.
This is, and then, I mean, I think the most brilliant thing, you know, not to get super religious, but it's like, you know, the devil's greatest accomplishment was to convince the world that it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
I mean, that's exactly like a huge analogy for white privilege and whiteness, right? That it's difficult to talk to white people about the fact that they have any privilege, right? And that when they post so audaciously on their Facebook, not even just like the looting stuff, right? But like even when they're saying, "Hi, I've identified all of my white privilege." There's like that thing on Facebook that's like, I can do this without consequence, and it has a quotation of some Black person who's been murdered, right? I can sleep in my bed without, you know, having 8 gunshots that kill me, Breonna Taylor, right? Even that rubs me the wrong way, because I'm like, who are you talking to? Like, every person of color knows this, especially Black people. Like, everyone knows this. It's almost like you're posting a Facebook post and it's like, water's wet. Water's wet, did you know? And what I really want to see, and this is, I think, conversations that I see definitely among Asian Americans, I think Latinx as well, it's a much more critical, like, it's like, what are we doing to uphold the system that thrives off of Black death, right? Not so much, I have a privilege where I am not like murdered indiscriminately, but no, how do my people do this? And I would love to see white people post like that, right?
Right.
Post like,
I completely agree with you. It's not enough to not be racist. Yep. And then one step further, it's not enough to recognize your privilege, but you have to be consciously, consistently anti-racist. Yeah. And it's that, the power in that is that you are talking to people that look like you, not talking to the rest of us and saying, oh, I know what privilege I have, but what other conversations are you having with your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, your racist spouse, maybe, about what all of that means, and trying to convince them of the reality of that, and then working to dismantle that. And not in just one conversation, because I've gotten a lot of people that are like, every holiday, I get anxious about being around my grandparents because they're so racist. And then I feel like I can't say anything because I don't want a confrontation, and they're really a good person, right? And I'm just like, okay, well, first of all, it's not just one conversation. Like, if someone has a lifetime bias or hatred or discrimination against Black people, then you're not going to be able to just change their mind in one conversation. That's not how it works, right? So you have to be committed to it constantly. And you can't just, don't make them feel comfortable being racist around you. I constantly tell people that. Make them feel as uncomfortable as I would feel listening to what they're saying about people that look like me when they're around you. Make them feel like it's unacceptable to behave that way, because that's where it starts. It's not about respectability politics. Oh, this is my parent, so I don't want to disrespect them. Well, racism is a disease. I consider it a mental illness. And every time someone else has mental illness, we seek treatment for them. And that's what's important here. Like, we want to fix the issue, and it's not just about one session. It's about many sessions over time. And even if you don't ever achieve your goal of making that person not just not racist, but anti-racist, even if you don't achieve the goal, that is what being a decent human being and ally is. Like doing the work without ever seeing an end in sight. Like your goal is always the forefront of your mind, but that doesn't mean that that's why you do it. Like it doesn't mean that like, okay, I've arrived. I'm now not racist and I've now made my mom not racist. That's not the goal. You have to constantly do work on yourself and constantly do the work with everyone around you. And I always tell people, challenge this idea of they're a good person, but they just have this prejudice. Nobody is perfect, right? Everybody has biases. Like it's very clear on that Harvard bias test. Everyone has some level of bias. I've taken it myself. I'm biased against white people. And it's probably because of my lived experience. But I know that, right? I know that, and I check myself when I see it happening in my language and the way that I talk to my kids, right? If I make a joke or an aside or whatever, and it's not extremely biased, but it's still biased. And that's what I need to be able to realize in myself, that just because I'm a social justice educator doesn't mean I have it all figured out. Doesn't mean that I'm always perfect all the time. Being an ally is not about being perfect, but being real and like being able to speak up to people that have it wrong, that don't recognize that they have. And a lot of the work I do is talking to other people that believe that they're like me,